There's a particular silence that happens after you say something slightly too honest in a group conversation, and everyone moves on within 2 seconds. But you stay in that silence for the rest of the night, replaying it, measuring it, wondering if the half-second pause before someone responded meant what you think it meant. Nobody else in that room is thinking about it anymore. You're still there, turning it over like a stone you can't put down. This is a strange way to live, and almost nobody talks about it directly because from the outside it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like being thoughtful. It looks like being the friend who remembers things, who senses when something's wrong before anyone says it out loud, who somehow always knows. People compliment this. They rely on it. What they don't see is what it costs to run that kind of attention all day, every day, in rooms most people walk through without a second thought. Awareness at this level isn't really a trait. It's a habit your mind built a long time ago, and it built it for a reason. Most people who live like this can trace it back, if they're honest, to somewhere in childhood where noticing things first was a kind of protection. Maybe it was a household where moods shifted without warning, and you learned to read the air before anyone opened their mouth. Maybe it was simpler than that, just being the kind of kid who paid close attention to people and getting rewarded for it again and again until attention itself became your role in every relationship you've had since. Either way, something in you decided a long time ago that watching closely kept you safe. And that decision never really got revisited. It just kept running, quietly, underneath everything else. Here's the first sign, and it's one almost nobody names out loud. You finish a conversation, and instead of moving on, you start auditing it. Not the whole thing. Usually one sentence. One look. The way someone's tone dropped slightly when you mentioned a certain plan, or the way they said, no, it's fine, in a tone that didn't sound fine at all. You'll be driving, or rinsing a dish, or trying to fall asleep, and the moment resurfaces on its own, asking to be looked at again. What you're really doing in those replays is searching for the exact point where something might have shifted, trying to locate a fracture that may not have even existed. It's detective work nobody assigned you, performed on conversations that ended, for everyone else, the moment they ended. There's a specific loneliness folded into that. You're frequently the only person still living inside a moment that is already closed for everyone else in the room. The second sign is quieter and a little harder to admit. You feel other people's emotions as though they're partly your responsibility. Someone walks into a room a little tense, and before they've said a single word, something in you has already adjusted. Your volume, your question, the joke you were about to make. You absorb the temperature of a space almost instantly, the way some people catch a cold. This isn't simple empathy. Empathy lets you feel for someone while staying anchored in yourself. This is closer to merging, your own emotional state quietly rearranging itself around someone else's, without your permission, without you really choosing it. I think this happens because somewhere along the way, you learned that other people's moods were information you needed in order to stay safe, or loved, or at least unbothered. So your nervous system never really stopped scanning for it. It just got better at hiding the scanning, even from you. The third sign is one that's easy to mistake for kindness. And it is kindness partly. But it's something else too. You often know exactly what someone needs to hear in a moment, and you choose to say something else instead. Because real honesty, the unfiltered kind, requires a level of exposure that doesn't always feel survivable. So you read the room completely. You understand it down to the smallest detail, and then you select the version of yourself that keeps everyone comfortable, including sometimes the version that protects you from being too visible. This isn't dishonesty exactly, it's a kind of fluency. You speak the unspoken language of a room so well that you can choose which truths get to surface and which ones stay folded inside you, unused. I don't think there's a clean way to feel good about that particular skill. It serves people. It also quietly costs you something every single time you use it. The fourth sign shows up in the things you notice that nobody meant for you to see. The forced laugh that doesn't reach the eyes, the compliment delivered slightly too fast, covering for something underneath it. The way someone says, "I'm great actually," with just enough emphasis that you know they rehearsed it. You catch these things not because you're trying to catch anyone, but because you've spent so much time around human behavior that the patterns simply present themselves to you, unbidden. The way a trained ear hears when a note is flat before the brain even decides to listen for pitch. This means you frequently walk away from conversations knowing more than the people in them intended to reveal. That's a strange kind of weight to carry. Information nobody handed you on purpose, that you now have to decide what to do with. There's another layer underneath all of this that's easy to overlook because it doesn't point outward at other people. It turns inward toward you. You start watching yourself the same way you watch everyone else. Did I talk too much in that meeting? Did that joke land wrong? Was I too quiet just now? And did anyone notice? And what did they probably think it meant? You become both the observer and the observed in your own life, narrating your own behavior in real time, auditing yourself with the same precision you'd apply to a stranger's smallest, most unconscious tell. It's exhausting in a way that's difficult to explain to people who don't live like this, because from the outside, it never looks like exhaustion. It looks like presence. It looks like being a good listener, an attentive partner, someone who just gets it. Nobody sees the cost because the cost never interrupts anything visibly. It just accumulates quietly, somewhere underneath the version of you that everyone gets to see. A fifth pattern worth naming. You tend to prepare for conversations that haven't happened yet. Before a difficult phone call, before a tense family dinner, before even an ordinary check-in with your boss, you've already run the conversation in your head. Multiple versions of it, multiple tones, multiple ways it could go sideways. You walk in having already lived through outcomes that may never occur. This isn't anxiety in the clinical sense, though it can feel adjacent to it. It's closer to a kind of preemptive fluency, an attempt to control an unpredictable moment by mentally living inside it before it arrives. The trouble is, you rarely get to experience anything for the first time. You're always meeting it for the second or third time in your head before it actually happens. What's interesting, and a little sad, honestly, is that this kind of preparation rarely makes the real conversation easier. It just means you've already spent the emotional energy you needed for the actual moment on a version of it that never existed. I want to pause here because something needs to be said plainly instead of softened. None of this makes you broken, or too sensitive, or somehow defective compared to people who move through the world more easily. What it makes you is someone whose mind built an extremely capable early warning system, in conditions that required one, and never got the updated information that the original danger has mostly passed. The radar still runs. It just doesn't always know what it's scanning for anymore. There's a sixth thing worth mentioning, and it might be the one that explains the rest. People who are this aware often struggle to receive simple, uncomplicated affection. A compliment lands, and your mind immediately starts looking for the angle. What does this person want? What comes next? Is this sincere or strategic? Genuine warmth, offered without conditions, can feel almost more unsettling than tension does, because tension is at least familiar terrain. You know how to read tension. Uncomplicated kindness doesn't give you anything to analyze, and that absence of something to analyze can feel oddly like danger. That's a hard thing to sit with. The very thing most people are searching for, easy, unguarded affection, can feel foreign to you precisely because your mind was trained to look for what's underneath things, and sometimes there's genuinely nothing underneath. Sometimes a kind comment is just a kind comment. Your radar doesn't always believe that, even when it's true. I don't have a complete answer for what to do with any of this, and I'd rather say that honestly than pretend otherwise. I don't think hyper-awareness simply switches off because you understand where it came from. Understanding helps. It doesn't dissolve the habit on its own. What I do think happens slowly for people who do this work, and it is work, is that the radar starts finding rooms where it doesn't need to run at full intensity. Relationships where the thing you predicted never actually shows up. Where calm just keeps being calm, again and again, ordinary day after ordinary day, until some skeptical, well-earned part of you cautiously starts to believe it might actually be safe to set a little of the vigilance down. Not all of it, maybe never all of it, but some. You didn't choose to become like this. Somewhere back in your history, a version of you much younger than you are now decided that paying extremely close attention was the safest way to move through the world. And that decision worked well enough, often enough, that your mind kept it running long after the original reason for it had quietly disappeared, and maybe the goal was never to notice less. Some of what you notice has made you a genuinely good friend, a perceptive partner, someone people feel unusually safe around, even if they can't say exactly why. Maybe the goal is simpler and harder than turning the awareness off. Maybe it's learning, slowly, room by room, person by person, which ones still require the radar, and which ones, quietly, have already earned the right for you to rest. You spent a long time learning to read danger in rooms that no longer hold any. Some part of you already knows this. The rest of you is still catching up at its own pace in its own time, and there's no real shortcut through that. If any of this sounded like your own life, I'd genuinely like to know which one of these hit closest to home for you. Tell me in the comments.